The dust tasted of sorrow and abandonment. It coated her tongue, her lips, her skin, a constant gritty reminder of where she was and how little she belonged. The sun beat down from a sky bleached white, relentless and unforgiving. This land, vast and indifferent, offered no solace, only hardship measured in aching steps and the gnawing emptiness in her belly. She was a girl, barely more than a child, adrift in a sea of faces that saw her not as a person, but a commodity. Her name, Alara, felt like a forgotten whisper. The man arrived like a shadow detaching itself from the heat haze. Tall, gaunt, weathered like ancient rock. His eyes, set deep in a face etched with hard lines, held a weary emptiness that mirrored her own, yet lacked the fear. He wasn't like the others who had passed through, their gazes lingering with avarice or cruel indifference. He simply stopped, his silence louder than any shout. The transaction was brief, brutal in its simplicity. A flick of a wrist, a coin tossed onto a rough wooden table. $1. That was the price. The man who owned her grinned, revealing stained teeth, and shoved her forward. She's yours. Good for work. He didn't elaborate, and the man didn't ask. He just looked at her, a long, dispassionate gaze that seemed to strip away her ragged clothes, her dirt, her fear, and see nothing, or perhaps everything she wasn't supposed to be. Despair settled heavy, a cloak woven from the dust. She had hoped, foolishly, for an end to her current misery, not merely a trade to another master. This man, silent and imposing, felt like a new, unknown terror. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a trapped bird desperate for escape. Every instinct screamed danger. His sheer presence, the way he held himself, spoke of a world far removed from the one she knew, a world of harsh certainties and unspoken rules. She waited for a command, a touch, anything that would reveal his intentions. But he only turned and began to walk, his stride long and steady, leaving her no choice but to follow. The sun beat down. The dust rose around her ankles. Her future, purchased for $1, stretched before her, an unknown path leading deeper into the vast, indifferent wilderness. The fear was a living thing now, coiled tight in her gut, whispering of horrors yet to come. She kept her gaze fixed on his back, a stoic, silent wall against the blinding light, wondering what cruel fate had delivered her to this man. The journey was a silent test of endurance. Days bled into weeks, marked only by the position of the sun and the gradual shift in the unforgiving landscape. They moved through desolate plains where the wind moaned like a restless spirit, over rocky outcrops that shredded her worn shoes, and across dry riverbeds that mocked her thirst. The man, whose name she learned was Elias, spoke only when necessary curt instructions about water, shelter, or the direction they were heading. "Drink," he'd say, offering a battered canteen. "Rest," indicating a patch of shade. His voice was low, rough, like stones tumbling in a dry creek bed. She followed, a shadow in his wake, her initial terror slowly giving way to a vigilant uncertainty. He didn't demand labor beyond setting up the small, sparse camp. He didn't lay a hand on her. He simply endured and expected her to do the same. His capabilities became apparent not through boastful words, but quiet actions. He moved with a predator's economy of motion, his senses sharp, reading the subtle signs of the land. He could find water where she saw only rock, track small game with uncanny skill, and build a fire with minimal fuss, its flames a small, fragile beacon in the vast darkness. At night, he slept a short distance from her, his form a still silhouette against the stars. She would watch him, trying to decipher the enigma he presented. The world she came from was one of blatant cruelty, of power exerted with casual brutality. Elias operated differently. His protection, if that's what it was a passive force. He simply didn't expose her to unnecessary risk, shared his meager provisions, and ensured their survival. It wasn't kindness as she understood it. It was a grim, practical necessity, a consequence of her now being his responsibility, a possession acquired. Slowly, tentatively, her fear began to transform. The raw terror lessened, replaced by a cautious observation. She learned to anticipate his needs, to recognize the subtle shifts in his demeanor. She started to breathe a little easier when he was near, a shameful admission she wouldn't voice even to herself. He remained an enigma, a man with a dollar's claim on her life, yet one who offered a strange, silent sanctuary in a world that had offered none. She still didn't understand why he had bought her, or what he intended, but the fact remained. She was still alive. And in this land, that was no small thing. The vast, empty landscape stretched on, indifferent to their small, fragile existence. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of something other than despair, a faint, hesitant ember of resilience. Their fragile peace was shattered by the sound of thunder on dry earth, hooves drumming closer, faster than any lone rider. Elias froze, his head snapping up, eyes narrowing. His hand went instinctively to the rifle slung across his back. The air grew heavy with a new tension, sharp and immediate. Alara's blood ran cold. Bandits. She knew the stories, the casual violence, the utter lack of mercy. They saw anything with value as theirs for the taking, and a girl, even a dusty, ragged one, certainly had value in their eyes. 3 riders emerged from the swirling dust, hard-faced men on wiry horses, their eyes glinting with malice. They pulled up short, surrounding Elias and Alara in a loose semicircle, their hands resting casually on the butts of their pistols. The leader, a man with a scarred lip and cruel smile, spat tobacco juice into the dust. Well, look what we have here. A lone prospector, and a little bird he's caught." His gaze raked over Alara, making her shrink back against Elias's side. Elias didn't move. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. "Keep moving," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The scarred man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Keep moving? Not before we see what you're carrying, old man. And maybe relieve you of your other burden." He gestured towards Alara with his chin. "A pretty thing, even under all that grime. Be worth a lot more than whatever paltry dust you've dug up." Alara's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. This was it, the moment she had dreaded. Elias had bought her for $1. He wouldn't risk his life for her. She was just a possession, easily relinquished to save his own skin. The familiar wave of despair washed over her, cold and absolute. But Elias didn't back down. He didn't offer to negotiate. He didn't even flinch. His gaze was fixed on the leader, unwavering. "She's not for sale," he stated, his voice still low, but with an undercurrent of iron. The bandits exchanged smirks. "Not for sale? Everything's got a price." The scarred man sneered, reaching for his pistol. "We'll just take her, then. And whatever else you got." It happened in a blur. Elias moved with a speed that belied his weary frame. He didn't draw his rifle. Instead, with a lightning-fast motion, he reached into his coat and produced something small and dark. It wasn't a weapon. Before Alara or the bandits could fully register what he held, Elias raised it to his mouth and blew. A thin, high-pitched whistle pierced the air, unnatural and chilling. The bandits froze, their eyes widening in sudden, stark terror. Their cruel smiles vanished, replaced by naked fear. The scarred man recoiled as if struck, his face paling under the dust. "By God!" he stammered, his hand freezing on his pistol. Elias held the small object aloft, the whistle echoing strangely in the sudden silence. He didn't say a word, just looked at them, his eyes cold and sharp. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered the whistle and tucked it back inside his coat. He didn't need to speak. The bandits understood. The shift in their demeanor was instantaneous and absolute. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a desperate need to flee. We were just passing through," the scarred man stammered, his voice shaking. "No trouble here. No trouble at all." Without another word, the 3 bandits wheeled their horses around and galloped away, as if the devil himself were on their heels, disappearing back into the dust cloud they had emerged from. Alara stood frozen, breathless, watching their frantic retreat, unable to comprehend what she had just witnessed. A single dollar bought her, and a single strange whistle had just saved her from men who feared nothing. Elias turned to look at her then, his expression unreadable. The fear returned, but it was different now, tinged with confusion and a profound, unsettling awe. What kind of man was this? Silence descended again, broken only by the wind and the fading sound of hooves. The dust settled, but the air still crackled with the aftershock of the encounter. Alara looked at Elias, trying to reconcile the stoic, weary man with the figure who had instilled such stark terror in hardened bandits with a mere sound. He offered no explanation, simply retrieved his rifle and gestured for her to continue walking. She obeyed, her mind reeling. That night, as the fire crackled, Alara finally found her voice, hesitant and small. The whistle. What was it? Elias looked into the flames for a long moment before replying, his voice low. Called them off. Called them off? She pressed, needing to understand. Why did they run? What did you do? He sighed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. It's a sound only certain ears hear. A signal. A warning. He paused, his gaze meeting hers for the first time with something other than practical assessment. It means, he said, his voice gaining a quiet, terrible gravity, that if they touched me or mine, their own would hunt them down. And what they do makes bandits look like choir boys. He didn't elaborate on who their own were, or what terrible deeds they committed. He didn't have to. The cold dread in her stomach was confirmation enough. Elias was not just a lone prospector. He was connected to something dangerous, something powerful, something that commanded fear even in the heart of this lawless land. And he had used that connection to protect her. He had bought her for $1. She was a possession. Yet, he had revealed a hidden, fearsome identity, not to harm her, but to shield her from harm. The implications settled deep within her. Her life, her safety, now tied to this formidable, mysterious man. It was a terrifying thought, and yet, paradoxically, it brought a strange sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. The world was still harsh, still dangerous, but she was no longer utterly alone and unprotected. The journey continued. The dynamic between them shifted subtly. The absolute fear she'd felt initially was replaced by a wary respect, a recognition of his quiet strength and the hidden depths of his power. She watched him now not just as a potential threat, but as a shield. Her small acts of contribution, helping with the fire, finding edible roots she remembered from her childhood, were met not with praise, but a silent nod, an acknowledgement of her presence, her growing competence. She was no longer just $1's worth of property. She was a companion in survival, a fragile partner in this desolate world. Alara, the girl who had been reduced to a price, found her voice, not through shouting, but through quiet observation, through endurance, through surviving by the side of a man who had shown her that even in the most barren landscape, resilience could take root. The land remained vast and indifferent, but she faced it now with a different spirit. She was still vulnerable, still uncertain of the path ahead, but the despair no longer held her captive. She had seen the face of fear, and she had seen the unexpected, terrifying force that Elias wielded against it. $1 had purchased her life, but survival by his side was forging her soul, piece by painful piece, into something unbreakable. Hope was not a grand, shining beacon, but a small, persistent flame, guarded fiercely in the heart of the wilderness.